Oh man, hi there. Welcome to Free Association. Sheldon and I were all asunder and we couldn't get it together for y'all on time, but that's okay because maybe you're watching this later, so this doesn't mean anything to you.
We're a mess.
I'm Lucy. That's Sheldon over there, the fellow with the beard. And as I say, Liberty.me live. See, I should have said that first. We don't have cuts though, we just keep rolling. And so here on Free Association, we're going to talk about Memorial Day, at least to start off, and not in the hey y'all gonna barbecue sense, but in the much more depressing sense. And Sheldon has a very interesting tradition about Memorial Day that I would like him to start us off with by describing.
Yeah, a few years ago I decided Memorial Day was sort of a waste of a holiday, so it could be put to better use. I put a link up there. People can see last year's blog post, which I'll be posting again this year. I changed the name of Memorial Day as a tribute to, or as an indication of how much influence I have in the world. No one else has changed the name, so it's only me. To Revisionist History Day. So instead of remembering the fallen from the wars, I want us to think about and learn more about why we got into those stupid wars in the first place, and which created the fallen. So I renamed it Revisionist History Day, and as a matter of tradition, although I will admit that I probably haven't followed this tradition religiously every year, but many years, I watched the movie The Americanization of Emily. You could pick your own anti-war movie, but I think that's a pretty good one because it's got some great monologues or soliloquies in it. So it would be nice if people took some time on Memorial Day to pick up a book of revisionist history about one of the wars. Pick your war, it doesn't matter. Because there's revisionist history to be found, and the idea being the winning governments write the histories usually, or certainly the historians who are slavish to the winning governments. So the mainline description of the war, for the reasons, the consequences, etc., the costs, are always, of course, shaded to flatter the people, the winners that went to war. The politicians and the generals, and which means there's a lot of room for revision of the official story, and in all wars, after all wars, there is literature that comes out, and so I have a list. It's a pretty long list, but it's nevertheless partial by its nature. It's got to be partial. So if you go to that site, that link, you'll see a long list of books and a few papers, actually a few things by me. Or at least one paper by me, I guess. Two papers.
Tell the good people, because they might be watching this later. Do you mean your blog, your Free Association blog? We can put that up.
Yeah, it's just Sheldon.
Later.
If you just go to sheldonrichmond.com and then search on, put in the name Emily, you'll find it. The American, because it's under the American. You'll find the American or Revisionist History Day. You will find the last few years that I've done this, with some clips, assuming these clips from YouTube haven't been taken down because of evil intellectual property rules. But you can watch some of the scenes from this movie and get a sense. I also have some long quotes from it, the particularly good quotes about war. The great line that comes out of that movie, by the way, is that we perpetuate war by exalting its sacrifices. Well, what's Memorial Day all about? It's about exalting the sacrifices of war, and that's according to either the screenwriter or the novel. This was based on a novel. I used to just attribute this to Paddy Chayefsky, who wrote the screenplay, and then I realized, no, it's a novel, so maybe he might have taken the line from the novel, so maybe the credit should go to the novelist, whose name I don't remember. But anyway, that's the line I like to remember. I had it turned into a bumper sticker, thanks to Scott Horton once, and it's my wallpaper on my Windows computer. Anyway, we perpetuate war by exalting its sacrifices. I could talk about the movie, but maybe you want to say something about revisionist history.
Well, I've seen that movie once, possibly twice. I'm about due to watch it again, though I have seen some of those clips and referenced them in my writings in the last few years because they're so good, and they're so damning. They're like, I don't know. I have the urge to compare it sort of to the folk song "Universal Soldier," in the sense that they say
was that Donovan?
That was a cover. The artist is Buffy.
Oh yes, St. Murray. Yeah, Buffy St. Murray. Sure. Yes, I've seen her perform that on film.
Right. But just not because it's exactly the same sentiments, but because they're both war sentiments that you really, even now, really aren't supposed to say. Not just a nice sort of, well, you know, peace would be just nifty, but soldiers are part of to blame, as in the song, a very damning song. And in the case of the Americanization of Emily, that there is this sort of grief ritual that may well be making this worse, which
in fact,
perhaps even more daring of a thing to say. Honestly.
He says we are to blame, the regular people.
Right.
And I'll read the quote because I think.
Do it. Yeah.
First, let me give a broad background to the movie. You know, it's in a way it's a lighthearted movie. I mean, James Garner plays the lead. He was not a you know a dramatic actor really. I think most of his stuff was lighthearted. Most of his movies and even his TV shows were always there was a wryness about them. So he's and Julie Andrews is his co-star and love interest. Very good cast: Melvin Douglas, James Coburn, a lot of good people. This movie came out around 1964 or so. It's in black and white. So it's set in London during World War II, and James Garner is in the Navy. He had seen combat somewhere in the islands in the Pacific and nearly died, and he had connections, and so he managed to get away from that terrible experience. And he ends up in London as an assistant to an admiral, and the admiral, of course, is living a relatively cushy life in London, mainly entertaining other officers and you know other dignitaries who are coming to London for one reason or another. And Garner's job as a I think they called this profession a dog robber. Is that the term? I'd have to look that up. I think it is. His job is to keep the admiral comfortable, and when the admiral throws a dinner party, make sure it is the best dinner party. If he wants to play bridge and they want two women to be partners, again, not for necessarily you know, improper purposes, just to make the room more pleasant, get the best people, pretty women, you know, keep this guy happy, which means helping him entertain other people, because that will be to his benefit. And so that's his job. And so he's got this amazing hotel room filled with Hershey's chocolates and oranges and the best stuff. And remember, the people of England are living on rations and they haven't seen chocolate in ages, but they got everything in this hotel room. All kinds of dresses, because if a woman is invited to play cards or to come to a cocktail party or a dinner party, she gets to pick out a dress because they want everybody dressed very nicely. So that's the background. He meets Julie Andrews, who's in the motor pool. She's a British. She's in the military in the motor pool, and so she's a driver, and she drives him, and so they end up falling in love and all that. I won't dwell on that stuff, and she's lost, like every male relative in her life has been killed in some war or another. Her brother, I think her father died in World War I. Her brother died in this war. Or maybe another brother died. So the mother is sort of living in a fantasy that they're all coming back. She's not really totally crazy. I mean, she knows she's in this fantasy. It's not the kind of thing where she's really, you know, just out of it. It's like she knows it. It's just a game she's playing to keep her sanity, I guess. And so Garner is invited. Charlie Madison, his name is. He's invited to tea. Julie Andrews wants him to meet his mother. They're starting to get serious, and so they start talking about the war, which Julie Andrews doesn't really want to talk about, and the mother's telling him about the losses. Well, not the losses again, speaking about as if they're going to come home, and they start talking about war. And at one point, the mother says, "Oh, I'm sure once the war's all over, the generals will write books and tell us, wars how terrible it was and how unnecessary it was." And so he says the following, which I'll read. It's not terribly long, but it gives you a sense of this movie. He's a pretty lighthearted guy, but when it comes to this subject, he then sort of turns serious, and he says, "I don't trust people who make bitter reflections about war," because she had just mentioned that the generals all write books about how terrible it was. He says, "It's always the generals with the bloodiest records who are the first to shout what a hell it is. And it's always the widows who lead the Memorial Day parades. We shall never end wars, Mrs. Barham, by blaming it on ministers and generals," ministers meaning like, cabinet ministers, "and generals or warmongering imperialists or all the other banal bogies. It's the rest of us who build statues to the generals and name boulevards after those ministers, the rest of us who make heroes of our dead and shrines of our battlefields. We wear our widows' weeds like nuns and perpetuate war by exalting its sacrifices." And then he goes on to say, "My brother died at Anzio," that was in Italy, "an everyday soldier's death, no special heroism involved. They buried what pieces they found of him. But my mother insists he died a brave death and pretends to be very proud. Now my other brother can't wait to reach enlistment age. That'll be in September. Maybe ministers and generals who blunder us into wars, but the least the rest of us can do is resist honoring the institution. What has my mother got for pretending bravery was admirable? She's under constant sedation and terrified she may wake up one morning and find her last son has run off to be brave." You watch that and you'll, at least I watch that, and I can't even read it without sort of welling up a bit, because it's really pretty amazing to think somebody could write those words in a movie that is in the United States. That's downright subversive. And he goes on. I wanted to read one other thing. He goes on to talk about the so-called virtue, moral virtue behind war, and he says, "I discovered." This is when he's talking about how he was cowering in wherever he was in the Pacific, hoping he wasn't going to get bombed any moment. He said, "It was then I discovered I was a coward. That's my new religion. I'm a big believer in it. Cowardice will save the world. War isn't hell at all. It's man at his best, the highest morality he's capable of. It's not war that's insane, you see." He's saying this, by the way, to the mother still. "It's the morality of it. It's not greed or ambition that makes war, it's goodness. Wars are always fought for the best of reasons, for liberation or manifest destiny, always against tyranny, always in the interest of humanity. So far this war, we've managed to butcher some 10 million humans in the interest of humanity. Next war, it seems we'll have to destroy all of man in order to preserve his damned dignity. It's not war that's unnatural to us, it's virtue. As long as valor remains a virtue, we shall have soldiers. So I preach cowardice. Through cowardice, we shall all be saved."
That's very Yossarian. Like Yossarian could have said as much,
Right. So you don't have to watch Emily. You can watch Catch-22 or lots of other.
Or read it. I haven't read The Americanization of Emily either, but I do. I used to have a copy, but I misplaced it. I think a lot of the stuff we really like, that may be the screenwriter's work. I get the sense that it was a fairly loose adaptation, but
okay.
I can't be sure offhand.
I should get a hold of it. I'm sure I can find it on Bookfinders. I've never read it, and I would like to know, because like I said, I always attribute this to Chayefsky. I hope I turned out that I was right to do that, but I hope the book's good too.
Yeah, it might be a different animal though. That's the only place that I have ever seen where they take this perspective. Again, you have Universal Soldier, you have a Siegfried Sassoon poem I was just looking out that's insulting the generals and the brass, sending the young men to their death. And none of these perspectives are wrong. unfortunately. They're all partially true, but to say that the war widows are part of the problem, that's still kind of tremendous in its audacity, because
Yeah. Well, you
nobody
know,
says that.
one thing I always put into this post every year, and people can see it when they go to it, is a picture that I found. It was an AP picture that I saw on a news site some years ago. Amazingly, I never got asked to take it down by the AP, because I'm sure they claim they own it. But it's a very touching picture. It made me think of the movie immediately, and I'll describe it. You see part of a soldier's coffin with the flag around it, right? And it's on like a gurney thing with wheels, like they're going to move it toward the gravesite. And sitting in front of it on a chair is obviously the widow, looking just dazed and out, looking at the casket, but just looking like she's just lost her husband. And standing right next to her, in front of her, is her son, who looks maybe 2 or less. And what's interesting about the son is that he's in a full dress Marine uniform. And when I thought of that, I thought of Charlie Madison's speech about how his son, his younger brother, couldn't wait for the day of enlistment to join up. Surely this kid will be filled with stuff all his life about his father's heroic death, and he'll join the Marines the moment he can. And hopefully it won't be the case, follow in his father's footsteps. And whenever I see that, I think of the movie, because there it is. It's such a powerful. I wish there's no way to display a picture, is there? If anybody watching right now goes to the site, that link, you'll see that picture. But to me, it's such a powerful picture. That little boy who looks like he's, I don't know, 3 feet tall, in a full dress. He's not wearing the hat, but otherwise full dress Marine uniform, pointing to the flag draped casket with the mother just like this. She's looking like this. It's it'll bring tears to your eye, and if you see that the Emily movie, it'll make you think of that, because you can just see he's just like the kid. He's like the brother, except he's younger, that Charlie Madison is describing, who can't wait to be a hero like his brother. And this is happening all the time. This is happening. I mean, I realize we have fewer boots on the ground these days, but there was a guy killed. Was last week or the week before, and of course, there's all the people who are not Americans who are dying, who have kids and families. Right?
Please.
We only think about the Americans. Right. And that's, of course, that's the problem. We've talked about this, I'm sure. That's the problem with drones. It cuts that cost to Americans to close to zero. It's still the occasional one, but it's like one now and then. Not like,
of course,
like Vietnam. Vietnam, we used to listen to the body count every night. Most of you are probably too young to remember that. You turn on Walter Cronkite or Huntley and Brinkley, and listen to how many Americans were killed versus how many. And hey, we won the body count again. Yeah, I guess we're winning.
Eesh. I
mean, that was a nasty way to spend your after dinner watching news with your parents.
The drones apparently still psychologically mess with people. It's really easy to, say you want to take out the world's smallest violin for the poor shell-shocked drone operators, but that's not very productive. And I still think that bodes well for humanity in the way that PTSD often does, which is that it's not good for humanity to kill people. We actually, with some exceptions, are quite bothered by that. And if you're a pilot in a normal aircraft, if you fire your missiles and then you get out of there.
Yeah.
A drone operator lingers over the site and has a much more opportunity to actually see the effect of what they've just done by firing a missile or what have you. So they sit there for 12 hours a day, observing on a hair trigger, and may actually commit violence suddenly, and then they may actually get to see what that violence looks like. So it's not just, PTSD is not just for soldiers who are in a foxhole and are worried about themselves and their brothers in arms or what have you.
Yes.
It really does bother people to kill other people, which hint. It's a very important hint for humanity that they still need to they need to follow up on that important clue.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's no way you can't that you could be unaffected by doing that. They know exactly what they're doing.
I have a broader question for you, and it's coming off of the Americanization of Emily, and it comes from me, who both is a giant history nerd and sort of thinks it's important to remember people, even if I don't know those people, and to honor people who aren't here anymore. How do you do that? How do you acknowledge that history happened and that people died without doing the thing that we don't want to do, without perpetuating war because we're exalting its sacrifices? I'm not quite sure. I mean, the very premise of Memorial Day is probably not good, but I don't want to deprive soldiers of gravestones and things like that, of course. I'm just not sure where the line is there, I guess.
Well, I'm certainly not advocating that you go to a military cemetery on Memorial Day when people are, mourning losses, recent or not so recent, and hector them.
Right.
That'd be a terrible thing to do, and I would never advocate it. I certainly could never want to do anything like that. I mean, so that's not the way to make this point. But of course, there are opportunities in conversation with people where you wouldn't be, annoying or intrusive to say, when appropriate, what have these people actually died for? I mean, isn't it in a sense that they really did die for nothing? I mean, you can refer to recent wars. You hear people talking about what's happening in Iraq. The U.S., I guess, is going to help the Iraqi army go into Fallujah, liberate Fallujah, and they say we have to do that. We gave up so much to get it the first time. Well, the U.S. committed atrocities on Fallujah. Was it 2004? I think 2 different times. Terrible. It was a free fire zone, basically. And there's a way to explain that when the circumstances are right. You have to have some sensitivity about it. You're not just out to offend people and make them dismiss you and run away. You haven't done anything good if they just say, I'm not talking to you, I'm leaving. You haven't done much good. You just have to pick your times. Or if you like to write, you can, write a letter to the editor or write an op-ed, or where you can, again, tastefully point this out, that what are these people actually dying for? There's ways to do it. I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, I don't know.
At least get your own head straight about it.
Yeah.
Even if you never talk to anybody about it, it can be difficult. I realize.
I mean, I think that at the end of the day, I don't know. A lot of people still give, not to violate Godwin's law, but they will actually give just following orders as an argument for anything.
Yeah.
And that's distressing. I don't think soldiers are let off the hook, even with, if they're stuck in some poor neighborhood and they got lied to, et cetera, et cetera. But I certainly, I don't. It does no good to just, yell baby killers and spit on them like the caricature of the Vietnam era protesters and things like that. That would be, that would be like for your satisfaction. It wouldn't be helping anything or doing anything except making people feel more like martyrs. Though I suppose if an Iraqi citizen had some words, I wouldn't exactly argue with them.
Right, and of course, again, it's something I already said. The movie, of course, doesn't blame the soldiers, and it doesn't even blame really the politicians and the ministers. Again, the message of Chayefsky's or the novelist is that this wouldn't happen if we, just sort of the regular people, didn't treat this like some great moment.
Well, that's part of it. I think that's part of the truth. But as I said before, all of these things are part of the truth and laying the blame firmly around. The Sassoon poem about the generals and blaming the war widows and blaming the soldiers. It's kind of everybody's fault in certain ways, which makes it so damned hard to stop, is because like the legitimacy of the state, the legitimacy of warfare is ingrained in everybody. You know, we all do our bit to make it legitimate. I don't know. It's hard for me to speak because I was blessedly homeschooled, but my boyfriend keeps mentioning that when he went to school, they spent, what was it, like a day on the Vietnam War in all of his history classes. His niece, who I help with homework sometimes, they spent a week on it. This is totally anecdotal, but I'm starting to wonder, boy, I wonder if they avoid the downer wars that America lost in public school history classes, if they cover anything at all. I'm just guessing, but I mean, certainly parenting and public schooling, that those are the institutions that teach people bad lessons and often perpetuate the message that yay authority and all else follows from that. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering about that. It makes me want to kind of ask around and other people who went to public school and what and how they learned about certain wars. I'd be interested to find that out sometime.
Yeah, that would be interesting to know too. The other thing that gets me going on this subject are those long Wounded Warrior Project infomercials.
Oh yeah.
Where they'll show somebody who's been really messed up by the war, and as a shell of his former self, and but has a young child, and so you hear the wife and the child talking about how he's my hero, and I do this for him and that for him. And there's one in particular, and every time I see it, I just get really angry because I wonder why people aren't shouting at the television, why did the government do that to this kid's father? That's not how a little girl should see her father.
No.
He should be intact and not have been taken away, even if he volunteered. He shouldn't have been deployed or sent to Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever it was. And obviously they're putting the best face on it. I don't hold them responsible for that, but you just want to get outraged saying, this wasn't ultimately done to him by an Iraqi or an Afghan. It was done by the U.S. government. Why wasn't this guy home with his family instead of off playing soldier somewhere?
And it doesn't, again, not to let every damn soldier off the hook for everything or anything like that, but there are people in this world who have absolutely no idea to the beginning of the types of things that we talk about incessantly here, all the depressing things. They've never read Catch-22. They never watched Americanization Family. They fundamentally, not because they're, stupid, they simply were taught the merits of authority, the heroism of soldiers and probably cops as well, and they haven't heard anything different. Not because they're rubes. They could have learned, but they didn't, and they just don't know. And I think a lot of people, as absurd as it sounds, there are soldiers, I've spoken to a few of them, who swear they didn't understand anything until they got there and said, oh my God, what am I doing here? And that ignorance isn't an exact excuse for everything, but I think even if we want to crankily insult soldiers in our more frustrated moments because they're part of it, they don't know. They just they don't know. Nobody told them, and I think that's we have so many libertarian lessons we want to impart to the world, and I think we sometimes forget how basic the lesson has to be sometimes, because sometimes the lesson is as basic as authority isn't a virtuous, Sure. Having respect for authority isn't suddenly a good thing. And I don't know.
Right, and then if you're gonna, if the person that you or I have approached and tried to bring this up with is serious about it, they're going to be drawn into looking at history, because it's going to be too easy for someone to say, yeah, but they attacked us on 9/11.
Right.
So now the answer to that is to look at what was going on before 9/11, which means history. and see how these things don't just come out of the blue usually. And we weren't just minding our own business, and one day somebody decided to fly planes into buildings and kill a bunch of people. Things were going on before that, so you can't just leave it at some more abstract moral theory about war, because people naturally will say, "Yeah, but didn't we have to do that because we got attacked?" And,
Well,
so now you're into the whole story.
I've lost heart a million times over the years, and I'm sure I will for the rest of my goddamn life in trying to explain the blowback thing. Call me Ron Paulette, because it's just very difficult for people, even intellectual conservative-ish types, the type who seem like they almost understand and swear they have sympathy for libertarianism. Some of them are still the ones who, there's just this complete block, this refusal to acknowledge. Not that there isn't religious, Wahhabist weirdness involved, and there isn't, religion isn't part of it, but somehow in their minds, religion is the only thing that motivates it ever. No matter what terrorists themselves say, no matter that politics exists in this world, it's still only religion, and they refuse. That's the line, and they will not cross it. And if you try to cross it, you are justifying violence against innocent Americans, just like Rudy Giuliani accused Ron Paul of doing in his grandstanding, nauseating moment from 6 or 8 years ago.
Yeah. No, absolutely right. And I don't know why, if it was just religion, I don't know why the people that have gotten caught engaging in terrorism and get in front of a court and have a chance to say something to a judge, why every time that happens, they never talk about religion. They talk about politics. They say this is retaliation. I mean, look at Ramzi Youssef and all the ones that have been brought before court, or go online and look up bin Laden's couple of declarations of war from the 90s against the U.S. He doesn't talk about religion. He doesn't say you're infidels or you're heathens or whatever the word would be, and we're Muslims and you're not, so therefore we're going to kill you. He cites very specific things about foreign policy, U.S. foreign policy. Even if you end up saying you disagree with him, that what he's saying is wrong isn't really wrong. I mean,
right.
Even if you were to say that, at least acknowledge that he's giving it's a political document.
Right.
He's not just saying we're Muslims and you're not, therefore we want to kill you. Right. I never hear anybody say that.
One of the bin Laden ones from a bit later, might have been after 9/11, there's, I believe, literally one mention of sort of the West being kind of immodest, and then there's like 14 other political grievances, and even the entry about the mention of the immodesty of the West isn't, as you say, we're Muslims, you're not.
I think you're lost. Are you there? Yeah, you're back. You disappeared for a second. I'm not hearing you. Can't hear. Are you hearing me?
Our network's out.
Well, I'm seeing her, so it can't be out. Oh, lost her again. We are out?
The TV's on.
Huh, it's still showing a signal, though, that I'm connected. You there? I'm getting a video feed. Do you hear me? I don't hear you. I see you, but I don't hear you. Stay back. I'm getting video, so we can't be totally out. We can't be out. It's not muted. You do hear me? She's saying she hears me. Well, I'm getting all. I have a full signal. Disconnect and try again. All right, I'm going to try to reboot and see what happens.
Probably stop this broadcast. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Guys, war is bad. Okay, we can't do this. I don't even know if people are hearing me. Tell the internet my darkest secrets. Internet, you're pretty okay. I'm going to mark this video as, hey, look, he's alive. I was about to reveal my true form as a reptilian person. But I guess Sheldon got in the way of that. So now you guys will never know the truth. Yes, it's true. Sheldon, I think we need to. Oh, hey, look, you're alive. Can you hear me? I take that as a no. Can you hear me?
I hear you now.
Are you serious? God damn it.
I just don't see you.
What?
I'm just seeing a dove. The dove in the circle, or whatever that is.
Sweet fancy Moses. I was rambling about nothing to the dead air while you were gone.
Oh, now I see.
Because I didn't even know if the audience could hear me or not. They probably can. That probably means we have.
Do we have an audience?
Know. Well, no, but the future audience, is this podcast even salvageable? It's like America. Started off with good intentions, and then it went horribly wrong.
No.
I don't know.
All right.
I mean, we can try.
Hey, this is the miracle of live webcasting.
Yes, but people will watch it later and they'll heavily downvote, and I don't blame them. I'll probably be one of them. Maybe they should. I sure lost my momentum too, I must say.
Well, tell us what you were saying when you thought no one was listening.
I was humming to myself and said war is bad, and then I pretended that I was about to reveal that I was a lizard person, because that was the most shocking secret that I could think of. You know, David Icke style. I'm not nearly powerful enough to be a lizard person, though, let's be honest.
Well, that'll make good listening. I don't know why you're worried.
I don't even know if they heard me, and I don't know which one is worse, if they did or they didn't.
So do we have any people watching now? I don't see any comments.
I see 2 viewers, which might be you and I. I'm not sure how it's counted.
No one has said anything. The last thing up there is the link I put up, which was at the very beginning.
This is the worst chat of all time. Woo!
Well, we said some good anti-war stuff.
We did. Didn't you want to talk about how Gary Johnson's terrible? Was that a thing that you wanted to mention?
Well, all I'll say is I read an article in the National Review, and whatever its ulterior motive was, don't forget they don't like Trump very much. They presented, I forget who wrote the article. He presented, who was it? Presented a list of facts about the 8 years that Johnson spent as governor of New Mexico, and it didn't sound all that great. He says spending grew each year more than it was growing at the national level. That the debt increased under the Constitution of the state. They have to have a balanced budget, but they have a separate set of books for, borrowing. So it's really kind of that's not Johnson's fault. That's the way they do it. But the debt apparently was growing, and then he even I don't know about if taxes went up or not. I forget what it said about that. But they said that he did things that a libertarian shouldn't be too thrilled about. He was very aggressive about getting movie makers to make movies in New Mexico, and so he offered subsidies of various kinds to bid them away from other states. It's worth looking up. Because I know the one fact I knew about Johnson's 8 years was that he vetoed 700 bills or something, 750. I forget that exact number, but it's like
he brags about whatever number it is.
So if this other thing is true, we at least ought to know about it, so we can be careful about what we say. He did get a B, I think, by the Cato Institute's. They do report cards on the governors. Yeah. In 2002. I don't know if that was his last year, but he got a B. They gave a couple of A's. It wasn't like they didn't give any A's. 2 people had A's. I forget who they are. They weren't really prominent governors. And so he only got a B, which is better than C and D and E. It's true.
Thanks for the reminder.
Or F. I don't know if they gave E's. Maybe just jump to F. So anyway, it's worth looking at, regardless of whether their motive was constructive or not. I mean, some people on Facebook were saying, it's a hit piece. So all that tells me it wasn't meant to be flattering. Okay, that's what a hit piece is, right? But what counts is not what the motive is, but the relevance and the accuracy. So if it's true, it certainly seems relevant. If it's true, then it's something we should know.
Yeah, National Review, depending on the author, I semi-trust or distrust. It sort of depends. I'm definitely going to check it out myself. I know other people who dislike him, and they point out that he didn't pardon any marijuana prisoners, shall we say, in spite of his fondness, even personal fondness for the drug. You could argue maybe he's getting more libertarian, sincerely, and he was merely sort of, thinking about going down that road while he was governor. But that's not it's not terribly encouraging that he only managed to figure these things out later. I don't know. I mean, practically the LP probably still should pick him. I think because
of the three, he's the most credible. And if he gets Weld, because now you have two guys who served 2 terms in real states as governor, so that may overcome some of the barrier to a third party. There's just natural barriers in the United States, so that might help somewhat. I just think they need to have a much more disciplined message. I mean, I don't know who advises them, but they need to know when they get interviewed, they have three. It's a 3-legged stool, right? It's free enterprise, civil liberties, peace, non-intervention. I mean, they just need to pound away at that.
Yeah. Well, Johnson has always been, let's say, gave him a B on intervention as well. And he, even in 2012, I actually pestered him about that in 2012. And I liked him because he let me annoy him. It was at a campaign thing for him. And he legitimately talked to me and acted like a human, not a politician. And I did appreciate that greatly. But he is not aggressively pro-peace, as it were. And he still doesn't seem to be, which is discouraging.
Yeah,
I mean,
this is a unique year. This is a year when the libertarians really could make some impact, given the nature of what's going on. The two of the most hated people ever to run for president are running, and it occurred to me the other day. I mean, it sort of occurred to me before that, but I think I put it in these more or less exact words the other day. This is going to be the first time that I can remember where the 2 major parties won't be arguing over. And I realize they didn't mean it, so I'm not being naive here. I realize it was lip service, but there won't even be lip service to free markets and shrinking government.
Right.
Republicans, not that they meant it, they never did much about it. At least they did talk about it. Now, maybe I'm wrong to think hypocrisy is better than no hypocrisy, because that gives us an opportunity that we wouldn't otherwise have. This year, the libertarian wouldn't just be thought of as, oh, you're just an extreme Republican, because they're talking about free enterprise too, and here you are talking about free enterprise. Trump's not going to talk about free enterprise. He never talks about it. He doesn't talk about it. He doesn't talk about limiting government. He doesn't talk about freedom. I'm no fan of the Constitution, but he doesn't even talk about that. He talks about the Second Amendment. That's about the only exception. So there's a clear lane for a libertarian, and the media might actually pay some attention. They paid some attention already. This is just a very different kind of year, and it's just too bad we're not poised to take advantage of it. There's not a strong candidate.
I don't know who that candidate would be, though. I mean, does such a man or woman exist in this world? I don't know.
Right. No, you needed to be building up for it, not just the night before. Find somebody, call central casting. Send me somebody who looks like a libertarian who can speak. I mean, I never met Johnson, but when I saw him, I don't know, maybe on TV or C-SPAN last time, he seemed very undynamic. He's
very undynamic. He's aggressively undynamic.
That's not good. He looked a little better. I saw him, I don't know, Jake Tapper a couple of weeks ago. It was brief, and most of it was not substantive because Tapper was interested in the nuts and bolts, of a third party and not talking about the substance. But what he said was okay, but I don't think he said anything about peace. I think he talked about civil liberties.
Yeah.
Socially liberal and fiscally conservative. Which is not my favorite way to put it.
No, there's definitely some serious flaws in that.
I mean, I guess it's a way to speak to people who are really unfamiliar with stuff, but you can't.
I think it might have its place, but it definitely belongs to the very beginning. The libertarian 90. It's not even 101. It's like edging someone towards the possibility of libertarianism is what it is.
It's the remedial course.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Before you get to take a real college level course.
I don't know. I want to make jokes about like conservatism being remedial libertarianism or objectivism being some kind of mean joke, but I can't formulate it right now. Yeah, I don't know about Johnson. I think I'm not terribly devoted to the LP, though. God knows I wish them more success than they tend to have. But I do wish they had some other person. McAfee is kind of epic sometimes, and he actually has good answers sometimes. But he on the Stossel debate, he had some good answers, but he has some serious flaws, and not just in the PR sense. But in the ideological sense as well. But I don't know. I don't know. Some part of me always wants to go full crank and go with the person like that, like the liberal and conservative nightmare of the libertarian, and McAfee is closer to that. So
yeah.
Just go with the man who was huddled in Belize with firearms and like a harem. Just do it. I'm ready. And the less said about Austin Peterson, the better, I suppose. So Austin Peterson actually is a paradox because he's actually the only person who is less unpleasant and unprincipled while running for political office. So that's pretty much my summation of him.
What'd you say? He's the only person who's less.
He's the only person in existence who is less. Who's more principled and better ideologically when running for office than he is in his normal life.
Oh, that's interesting. I guess I do like his line about, what's he say? I do favor gay couples being able to guard their marijuana fields with guns.
That is not his fucking line.
That's not his line, okay.
Oh my God,
Did he appropriate it?
He did appropriate it, and I guess we're against IP, so we can let him, but he, that's at least a 10-year-old meme, which was funny and fitting the first time, and he's kind of pretending that's his own thing. He quotes Bastiat without mentioning who said the thing. I have many issues there, but, we're talking Trump versus Hillary, so it's not.
Yeah.
I should let my my beef go at this point. McAfee! Because fuck it! I don't know.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we can wind down. Watch a good anti-war movie on Monday. If you can't get a hold of Emily, which I highly recommend, find another one of those great ones. Path to Glory and Catch-22 or I'm drawing a blank.
I want you to make me a list, and maybe I can post along with this podcast, which will give it a redeeming factor, and I'll tell people to skip about 10 minutes in the middle where I stare at it's humming to myself as you restart your computer. But we should make lists of the finest anti-war media. Maybe I should do that for anti-war, and I can gather different people's lists. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Here's a good one. The most recent one I think I know of is about the Civil War. So there's a good subject. It's called Copperhead. Did you see Copperhead?
I did, actually.
Copperhead was a novel from the late 19th century, but the screenplay was written by Bill Kaufman. Do you know who Bill Kaufman is? The guy who writes a column for the American Conservative. He's as I once said to him, he's the only guy that can make me feel good about the word conservative. He's one of the, what do they call those, front porch conservatives?
Oh yeah. I've been trying to figure what that was.
He's really good, and he writes good history. He's a good anti-war guy, and this is a great story about a guy not in the South, but a guy in upstate New York who's opposed to the war, where everyone else is in favor of the war. We're going to go smash the South and free the slaves, and he's anti-war not because he's pro-slavery or anything. He just knows it's going to be a slaughterhouse, and it's Peter Fonda's in it. That's worth seeing. Shenandoah is a great old one. That's also Civil War with James Stewart. Definitely worth seeing.
Yeah, there's a quote. I love Jimmy Stewart, and I've seen a clip from Shenandoah where he says something, and it seems awesome. And I should watch that. I can't remember, but it struck me as.
There's a lot of good lines. Someone asks him, who's winning the war, and he says something like, It's just like any war. The Undertakers are winning.
Oh man.
There's some really good lines in that. He's a Southerner. He's not a slave owner, but he's a Southerner with like 5 sons. He's a widower, and they want to just stay out of the war, but of course the war won't let them alone. They're bothered by both the Union and the Confederacy, and he goes through hell. It's really good. It's kind of a long movie, but it's grueling because his life is just turned totally upside down.
And now that we're here, I suggest, though it's not about America, the movie Generation, which is based, sometimes it's called Behind the Lines. There was a U.S. edit of it because that needs to be a thing, called Behind the Lines. But the original is Regeneration, and it's based on a novel by a woman named Pat Barker, and it's a trilogy, though the first book is the best, and it's historical fiction. It has a lot of real people like William Rivers, Siegfried Sassoon, Wilfred Owen, people who ended up at this real shell-shock hospital in Scotland during World War I. And it's just a really good look at shell-shock and ideology and soldiers and stuff. And God knows, I don't know if it's really rings true or not, because I'm a lady from now, and it's written by a woman in the 90s, so... But it feels like it rings true, like she did her research and sort of did the best she could. And the movie is great. The movie stars Jonathan Pryce, who is now being a religious maniac on Game of Thrones, and he's really good.
Jonathan Pryce became a religious maniac?
On Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
It's not real.
I'm a big fan of his because he's the star of Brazil.
Is he really?
It's one of my favorite movies.
My mom adores that movie, and I have not seen yet, which is a travesty.
Oh, you must see it. Oh, it's a wonderful movie. Great cast. Yeah. Very libertarian. Terry Gilliam was behind that. He produced it, directed it.
I know. I have to see that. That's very high.
Another good movie to see, anti-war movie, is of course the old Stand By, Quiet on the Western Front.
Of course.
Great book, but also made a good movie. And even though it's by the evil Dalton Trumbo, there's Johnny Got His Gun, which is a very depressing movie. But
yeah, I've heard of that.
And then there's a couple of good Australian movies. There's Gallipoli with an very early Mel Gibson movie.
That is a good movie.
Terrible battle in World War I. And also Breaker Morant.
Yeah, another good one. Sure.
Which is about British imperialism and the Boer War and how they tried to make examples of 3 soldiers for stuff the Empire was routinely doing, but they had to make an example and try 3 soldiers. Edward Woodward is in it. He's one of my favorite actors. So there's lots of good. Sorry, go ahead.
That was one of my dad's favorites, and I watched it a couple of years ago. It's very good.
Yeah, it's very good. Yeah, there's no shortage, but there's some good ones. But
both the book and the movie Catch-22 are of course essential viewing and reading.
Yeah.
There's a lot. There's a lot more.
Yeah, that's enough to get you started. That'll fill your Memorial Day.
Yeah, you'll feel real chipper
afterwards. If you can get a hold of Emily and you can see only one, that would be a good one.
Concur, absolutely.
Very entertaining as well as
full
of a good message, but it's definitely entertaining. Because I haven't even told you about the twists in the plot.
Of course.
And so I won't go into that. But D-Day is coming up in the story, so he ends up James Garner, who, like I said, had this cushy life, gets caught up in D-Day in a way he never expected to. So there's a good story there. It's not just him making speeches and romancing Julie Andrews. There's much more to it.
But that also sounds pretty good because
well, they didn't believe they didn't get reunited in a movie until Victor Victoria, which is not an anti-war movie, but it is a good movie.
Indeed.
We were going to talk about Maverick, and we were going to talk about the Rockford Files.
Yeah, secretly, this is just a James Garner themed podcast.
Which movie were you were going to talk about?
The Great Escape.
Oh, The Great Escape. Yes, great movie.
Where he's
the Scrounger.
Oh my God! Thank you. I was blanking. That would have been
he gets you any equipment or whatever you need. He'll get it.
Yeah, he's the one who blackmails and wheedles the poor German soldier, the guard.
Yeah,
The
Werner.
camera and stuff.
Werner.
Yes.
Takes his wallet so that the forger can then make the documents. Yeah, great. That's a great movie. Great movie.
And they talk about the merit badges he has. And
one more thing about James Garner. I realize we're way off our topic, and we got to go anyway.
It's off topic, damn
A
it.
very good movie of his. It's not any war, but maybe you could say it's anti-violence. Is Support Your Local Sheriff.
Okay.
It's
Never
one of
seen
the
that.
funniest westerns ever. He's
Okay.
just great. He's great at it. He's the sheriff, the guy that becomes the sheriff, and it's
He's
just
good.
really well done movie.
Very good at being comedic. You know, he's
Yeah.
like, he was
Oh,
a
he was great.
ridiculously handsome man, but he had this funny quality. That
Plus, he
made
was
him
always the
fun to
kind of
watch.
guy who figured he could talk his way out of any difficult situation. That's what Brett Maverick did when he's Rockford. You know, even though he sometimes carried a gun, he didn't have a permit, so he had to be careful about that. He didn't really like to use his fists, and he would rather talk his way out of things. So yeah, he had that quality, that sort of roguish, charm, and he might try to scam you, but he would never use force.
Mhm.
That's a virtue.
Right. That's right.
Okay, well, happy Memorial Day.
On that note, this has been a very strange, confusing podcast. In the middle is just me staring awkwardly, but you know what? That's life. And so you should go. Always read Sheldon. He and I both have had some light week or two in terms of writing, but there's always writing.
I've been trying to make money lately.
Don't do that. That's silly.
It means I've been editing, which is more lucrative than writing.
Well, so you should still go to his free association blog. You know that. I know it.
That's SheldonRichmond.com will get you there.
And antiwar.com is also a place to visit, especially Memorial Day. I think Eric Garris is going to pull something together for Memorial Day. Probably be very stressed, so I should probably write him something. And I have more Playboy writings, which is kind of hard to get to. But on my Twitter, you can get there. And today I had a thing about various weird third parties and familiar ones like the Libertarian Party that America has.
I will have to check it out. I will check it out. Okay. And we'll be
All
back
right.
in 2 weeks.
Yeah, hopefully a little more prepared, competent, and sitting up straighter.
And no glitches.
No glitches. All right, but it's a pleasure as always, Sheldon.
Same here. See you online. Bye.
Bye.